On the other side of toxic Christianity, I found myself faced with one question. Now what? This podcast is about that question. We have conversations with folks who are asking themselves the same things. We're picking up the pieces of a fractured and fragmented faith. We're finding treasure in what the church called trash, beauty and solidarity in people and places we were told to fear, reject, and dismiss. I'm Tammy Spencer Helms, and this is Life After Leaven. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Life After Leaven. I'm your host, Tammy Spencer Helms. It's an honor to be with you. I'm super excited to have my dear friend, Amber Bryant, on with me today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Amber, and then we're going to jump in. Amber is a Columbus, Ohio native and a passionate pursuer of humanity and the divine. She comes from a long line of community leaders and civil rights activists. She has now taken her place among them in the fight to bring justice and healing to people and systems alike. She works with local community leaders to combat gentrification, overdevelopment, and displacement in long-standing communities of color, and to care for those who have been relegated to the margins of society. Today, she can be found doing anti-racism work with the International Inverse podcast community, Whoop Whoop, working with her local ministry to be the hands and feet of Jesus to all people, and helping out in her childhood neighborhood. Amber lives her life as one aware that she's part of a legacy she has the honor and responsibility to build on and carry forward. In her free time, she can be found singing, journaling, reading, creating ways to connect communities for healing while seeking guidance from her creator. Welcome, Amber.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited. You guys are in for a treat. Oh my gosh. So, the show is about, we're basing the show on the concept of leaven, which was the toxic whiteness that had infiltrated theology and life and self-image and all of those things. And so this podcast is called Life After Leaven because I find that I've kind of gotten into this community of people who have done the same thing and gone on a similar journey. And so I want to bring those people on so that those who have read the book or who are being touched by the book can see that there's so many like us out here. I can cut this too. Good. So, Amber, I want to talk to you specifically because at the end of the book, I start to talk about something called my brunch community. And I'm really grateful for this thing that you created and really care that people get to hear about your vision behind that and your heart behind that. But first, can you tell me a little bit, maybe what it was like before and after you unleavened? Can you give me kind of a history, just so people can get to know you first before we jump in?
Yeah. I honestly feel like the beginning of my faith, I tasted unleavened bread first.
Mm-hmm.
For me, my conversion, if you will, was a radical one in that I was like 13 years old, depressed and lonely, and like just having suicidal ideation, like for the longest time. And I remember at one point feeling a presence that it I just remember feeling a presence, and that presence speaking to me and not being scared, but also being like, who are you and why are you here?
Mm-hmm.
Um and for me, what caused that radical change where I gave my life to Jesus literally was sitting in a service hearing about how when we long for God, it's actually our response to Jesus seeking us first.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I remember weeping, thinking, oh my gosh, someone wants me.
Mm-hmm.
And just hearing that same presence say, if you don't want your life, I'll take it.
Mm.
Um, and that was like one of our first encounters. And I
Yes.
and I just remember even the first few months before I ended up churchified. The first few months, um, just really feeling alive and at ease, being myself,
Yes.
and like being curious and being told like this who I now this presence that I came to know, a spirit saying, "Hey, bring all your questions to me because the truth can withstand your questioning. I don't want you to ever not bring your questions to me."
Yes.
Um, so that's how I started.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I became more churchified is when I started feeling the weight of expectation of
Mm.
other people again.
Wow.
Um, and I remember like I would get all these accolades for being a great youth
Mm-hmm.
because I was the only one who like had had such an encounter. But like other kids didn't like me because they were like, "You're a goody choose," and so it kind of like it kind of brought me back to that same sort of place of being rejected,
Mm-hmm.
and lonely. Only this time I had Jesus, so it was different. But unfortunately, like I had learned self-righteousness at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, well, at least I'm living better than you heathens.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I remember at one point um, telling God, just I would go to church and just feel the pressure
Mm-hmm.
to perform all the time.
Yeah.
Like it was palpable. And I remember at one point when I was 16, I was like, God, I'm being told that I should go to church, and that's how I prove I'm a Christian. I was like, but if I keep going to this church, I'm going to lose you.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, it's either you and I step out or I stay here and be the good Christian. And so I stepped out and then stepped into white evangelicalism because they promised that they would be more family than what I had known before.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And so that whole thing, just to not go into too much detail, was a whole ride of learning like all this awful theology about putting people in hierarchies and how, and like making sin a hierarchy. And then instead of having love and compassion for people, relegating them to ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, we're supposed to hate gay people, so gay people are now this idea, not actually human beings.
Right.
And so now, and it's okay to hate them because that's holy. And doing that to entire groups of people,
Mm-hmm.
including myself, not even realizing as a Black woman, being like, oh yes, these are also things. So I'm also trying to be white, like all of this like mess.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, what really caused me to stop playing around
Mm-hmm.
was coming back to a place where I was like depressed and lonely. And I was like, I have this faith that's mine, but
Yeah.
like, I don't feel fed and I don't trust God. And once again, sitting there, just like journaling, and spirit comes to me and says, I am not a white man.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, oh, okay, then we got some work to do. I
Wow.
was like, cause what I've been eating off ain't it? So
Mm. Sis, it's like it's so interesting to hear so much similarity, and interestingly like how you went from this encounter with God to being churchified then into white evangelicalism. So that's almost like a double a double whammy of trauma and things to having to like to work out. I'm wondering, when you talked about coming back to that sadness, what was the next step? Like what did you do? You say you kind of circle back to this initial sadness that you had before the presence came and tells you that you're loved. And then you have this other set of sadness where this presence comes and says, I'm not a white man. So are you gathering like those things to kind of form for yourself a new way of thinking about God, or what does it look like now for you?
Yeah, yeah, I would say in those times alone, I gathered a lot,
Mhm,
but also, and just because I glossed over it, there, I feel like God just, in God's kindness along the way, I kept finding people who lived with integrity
mhm,
and like knew how to love and like kind of like a foretelling, like, hey, like what you're like taking in, it's probably not what you think it is. And
mhm,
so I feel like I had the breadcrumbs along the way, and then I had those moments of
mhm,
encounter. Um, and I think the biggest one is after the encounter where Spears said, "I'm not a white man." I it took it took a moment, but then I had to look at what I was doing and how was I moving in the midst of all of these things? Because it wasn't just happening to me, because I was actually actively making choices
mhm,
to be in these different spaces. And I had to stop and be like, well, why?
mhm,
And then start to question, okay, well, where is God truly in this? And who is God truly?
mhm.
And like how much of it is just me, repeating a story of trauma from my childhood or trying to like make God out to be a boogeyman so I feel okay like making this
Yeah,
decision that I was told was sinful, but I kind of like what's
yes,
happening.
exactly.
Um
Yeah.
like facing that and and like as I did that, realizing that Jesus was standing right there
Mhm,
and was so much kinder
mhm,
and so much sweeter and had more space for me to take up
mhm,
than I was allowing myself to
mhm,
take up. And so now now when I look at God, when I look at Jesus, when I look at spirit, what I see is grace. What I see is room for my humanity
yeah.
and like no pressure to perform or try to be otherwise. That like who and what I am
Mhm,
is both holy and beautiful. And regardless of like the pressures or what other people say, I can choose to hold and love me
mhm,
because my worth and value
yes,
has been spoken over me by the creator.
mhm,
And like no one, and that word is indelible. And so yeah, so that's kind of how it is now. I'm like, what is your goodness today? And how can I lean into it?
what is your goodness today, and how can I lean into it? Say la. Yes, you always have flames though. People just don't know. I cannot wait for you to tell people where to find you and all of that because my God. All right, let's get to our topic because I think I literally could listen to you all day. Um, so our topic is church and community. Because I think people might be wondering, you know, all right, let's say I agree that there's an issue. Let's say I agree, and all of the things that bothered you have been bothering me, and I'm willing to step out of this. Um, but the question is now what? And that's what this season is about. Now what? Like, what do we do now that we're okay? You're right. This is toxic. I'm leaving. Still love Jesus. Now what? Right. Um, so a little bit of my story before we lean into this. Um, I was in that place, and when I met Ellison, my spouse, um, they were going to something called Subversive Seminary, which was a part of the Inverse community that was in Amber's bio. Uh, and so I started attending that and met this wonderful group of people, and you will meet all of them I have all of them scheduled this season, um, who were just phenomenal. And it made me, for the first time, feel like I could fully be me and fully love God, and nobody would question that. And I think some people are worried that that might not be the case because they've either, like you said, been sold like we're going to be family, and you find out it's not.
Mhm.
Um, they've been sold a lie, so they're not trustworthy of this. And so here you are. I want you to put me the moment the idea comes in your head, to start brunch, and talk to us about the idea. Talk to us about Just talk to us about it and what church and community can look like, on the other side of whiteness.
Yeah. Um, so a few things had been ruminating in me. So one, after that encounter, where God's like, I'm not a white man, and I had to start unraveling myself from the whiteness I'd wrapped myself around. Um, there was a reckoning. And like when I say my soul was wrecked on the daily,
Mm.
like I feel like instead of like gently like unraveling, I felt like you know how they beat carpets to like get the dust and dirt off? Every day I'd wake up and I'd be like, damn, again? Like this is too much truth. This is and and so like that stayed with me because for me that's a mark to show compassion.
Mhm.
Um, and then as we were going through the study with Inverse, is focused around anti-racism work. Just seeing, though it was a good work, it also was heavy and costly.
Mhm.
Um, and I remember reading, I think it was a Brene Brown post on Instagram. Um, I really couldn't tell you. I'm like, it was a white lady, but she was cool. Like but basically saying that historically, what happens with anti-racist movements is
Mhm.
that those who want to perpetuate white supremacy and racism, all they do is make sure they can outlast those who are pressing against it. And so their warning was like, just don't burn out. And
Mhm.
so as we were doing that, I was hearing people like talking about how heavy it was. I was like, we need a way to not burn out. We
Mhm.
need a way to sustain this. And so people kept talking about we need soul care. And then one day I was like thinking about my little brother and how like I try to show up for him and make space for him and how like as I just like study him in our interactions, how when I stopped talking and left silence, he in that silence, he felt empowered to start speaking. And where he would normally be absolutely silent for like half an hour, if I sat there long enough, he would talk my ear off for the next hour and a half.
Mm.
And I'm like, it showed me two things that one, he desperately needed someone to listen and to be free to use his voice, but also that he needed to know that there was actually space for him to do so. And I was like,
Mm.
if one plus one is two, perhaps.
Yeah.
And that was where I got the idea. I was like, because when I'm hurt, if I have a friend who just listens, it lifts the weight so much more.
Mhm.
And if they stay close and they're like, I'm bearing witness to your story, but I'm also carrying you with me, I'm like, cool. I'm like, I'm hurting. Like, I feel like my insides are on the outside, but let's go scale some mountains and let's go destroy some systems, some injustice systems. And then we're gonna go home, we're gonna cry, we gonna like, we're gonna have our moments together, But then once we do that, again, that pressure is going to lift. I'm buoy back up to the top and I'm do the same work over and over again. So yeah. And I was like, I wanted to bring that to people to offer some longevity, not just a relationship, but in passionately pursuing justice.
Mhm. Mhm. It's so interesting that you say that because I think about how I used to feel when I would leave church and it was the exact opposite. It
Mm,
was like the week leading up to go church was so disconnected from like my actual week. It's like, I'm dealing with coworkers and work drama and taxes and gas money and lunch going, getting moldy. I'm dealing with life. I go to church and they're talking about random, treatises on St. Augustine's Confessions. It's like, I get it, but it doesn't actually relate. Or they're doing something like something really simple that doesn't meet the edge, right? So they could be making it about, life, but it's mostly like Johnny and Susie just need to learn to pray together, right? And it's like, I need something that's edgy, that's going to match how I'm living my life, but that
mhm,
also isn't going to make me feel all these burdens to go back into an already heavy world. And that's what I think is so amazing about what you've crafted, because it is the coming together and saying, guys, this is all of my shit from the week. And we all lay it down, and then we have communion around this bonfire of our shit from the week, right? And
yes.
we go back out and we come together, and it makes Sunday Sabbath for me. It makes Sunday like my favorite day of the week now, because you're known and loved and seen, and
Mhm,
there's space. And it's like, it makes me wonder if that is like, now if that is what ecclesia always meant, right? We've been sold a lie, because I
mhm.
don't know how many people feel that on a weekly basis. Um, and I think the interesting thing about COVID is that it actually forced some of this,
Yeah.
right? And I think lots of exiles began to like try again, right? Because there was a safety there, there was technology, there was a screen. I could log off, I could turn my camera off if I want to.
Mhm.
So there were all these things you could do electronically that you could never do in actual church, like log off in church or turn your camera off in church or something. But I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking about how you went from an idea, you saw this idea come to fruition. So how did people find, like, talk a little bit about some of the folks, like the initial responses. What were people feeling and why were they coming? What was kind of the initial buzz around it?
Yeah, I'm like, it's been a minute.
Yeah.
Um, Initially, I want to say it was people that I had found a personal connection with in Inverse.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for me, for me coming to Inverse, like the Subversive Seminary,
Yeah.
was like finding my people. I was like,
Right.
you,
Wait, what? You too?
especially, shout out to Nine Nine.
Hey, Nadia,
Like,
you will hear from her
like,
too.
man, talk about big sister energy.
Yes.
Like that was so healing on so many levels.
Mhm.
Um, she didn't come to brunch, but I just wanted to mention her because I'm like, I just love her.
Period. Gathered us in. Well, me and you. So yeah, us.
But yeah, like the first few people were people that I had a connection with, and I was like telling people, come to this thing I'm doing. Um, at first people were apprehensive because I was like, talk for 10 minutes. You're not allowed to shorten your time or lengthen your time. If you don't talk in the 10 minutes, we'll just sit in silence and leave that space for you. And at first, people were like, what? Why?
Mm-hmm.
10 minutes? That's too long. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, no, 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was just funny because the first few bunches I would like stop and like be like, give me feedback. Like, is this actually doing what like I intend for it to? And the feedback that I got at first was that the fact that it was okay to take up that space, the fact that it was allocated to them and nobody else, that there was a freedom and a sense of safety. Like, oh, no one's going to push back on me and say you're being too much.
Mhm.
I'm free to just fill up this space.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
like people who thought they wouldn't fill up the 10 minutes found that they easily did.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah.
And the fact that like the pressure and the fact that one of the tenets is we don't give feedback or advice.
Yeah.
We're just there to bear witness.
Hmm.
Also led people to one be more vulnerable in their sharing, but for those listening, they weren't listening to like offer some pious like response. They were just listening. And like we found that they're in not having that pressure to perform by saying something radical afterwards or even comforting, to
Hmm.
be honest, that there was a capacity to simply have compassion and empathy
Yes.
and just hold that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and I think I think the fact that that was so transformative is why those first few people started telling other people, you need to get in on this.
Yeah.
Like, if you're having a hard time, you need to come to brunch with
Hmm.
us on Sundays.
Hmm. Hmm. I'm so thankful that you created that space. I um, believe that it really solidified the idea that God sets lonely and family, that you have a unique ability. So I'm going to brag on my friend a little bit before I ask the final questions. But you have a unique ability to see a need and craft something beautiful for the space, to set it in a seedling form, water it, and go. And I see you do that so much that I'm like so excited for people to get to know you, to read your words, incredible poetry and writing. And I'm just so thankful for the space that you've created and for the hope that it provides for people, that it is possible to find safety and home. And I love that we can talk about Beyonce, cuss, cry, take communion, worship, and Kiki all in the same. That's community. Like that is what I think church and community was always meant to be. And so I'm just thankful for that. I'm thankful for you and what you created. Um, and I'm gonna ask you what you're doing now, but first I'm gonna give you these last three questions.
Okay.
Um, this is the questions we ask everybody. The questions are, what are you bringing? So, what's coming with you out of the rubble of what you had? What are you binging? So, is there an album or a movie or documentary series or anything like that that you're binging, or a book series? And then lastly, any words of wisdom or words to live by. So whenever you're ready, go ahead. You can take all the time you need to think.
Girl, you know I got that ADD. I might need you to repeat.
Yeah. What are you bringing? What are you bringing with you out of the rubble of what was your faith?
I think for me, what I'm bringing out, I feel like, how do I say, I feel like there was an innate curiosity that I held,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of crap got piled onto it. But as I came out, I feel like it transformed into a willingness to embrace mystery.
Mm-hmm.
to accept that there are simply going to be things that I don't know. And it is okay to just trust God and love people. I'm
Mhm.
like, so that's all I do. I'm like, physically, my brain could not even hold all of what there is to know. So it's completely possible that something is completely true and I don't know it. I'm
Mhm.
like, but I just think of what Jesus said, love God and love people. So I'm like, and I feel like, and there's a whole reason, like, whole backstory, but I feel like God's love language is trust. So I'm like, trust God, love people.
God's love language is trust. Sheesh. See y'all? Definitely having her back. Why don't we just tell the people where to find you first? Because after that, people need to know where to find you.
Yeah, so I'm gonna be real, y'all. I'm working on actually putting my stuff on the socials, but if you want, getting ground level, I have my Instagram, which is am underscore Bryant. The same handle is the same for Twitter. And then my Substack, that is a good question. How did I know it's
Amber
AM
Speaks.
Bryant? Huh?
It's Amber
Yes,
Speaks. Yeah.
Amber Speaks.
Mhm.
I believe it's ambryant.substack.com is how you have to type it out. But yeah, that is where you will find my writing. Um, I'm still developing, as Jared likes to say, a hermeneutic
Yeah.
with how I write there, but that is a space I'm like, I have like angry poetry that I write because, when you love and you see injustice, there's a lot of anger. I have angry poetry and just reflections that
I think you have a lot of like if you were to like have a drink, the tones are like Audre Lorde and like Zora Neale Hurston, like Tony type of vibe. Like if you were to mix those three things together and put it in a drink, that would be like what your writing feels like. Y'all just gotta check it out. It's incredible. You're an incredible writer. Um,
think.
let's see. Oh, second question. Were you binging?
Um, okay. So I have so my binge is always going to be okay. I was going to say always going to be music, but lightweight, your girl then got into K dramas.
Hey.
Like it started out, I just was watching one and I was like, this man is pretty. I was like, that man is also pretty. And then I looked, I was like, there is a host of pretty men. And it also helps that like in having to like sit and read the subtitles and be introduced even to a different culture and way people interact with each other, that I feel is still more mindful, is more mindful than what I'm used to because I don't want to like compare cultures. It's just I'm finding that there's more application of mindfulness. Like it's just so liberating to me. And so I'm watching a lot of those, but also I have a playlist on Spotify
Hey.
called Ladies. So it's like all women of color, like Kalani, SZA, Jasmine Sullivan. Um, so I'm like Ellie May, how are you say girl's name? She's a bomb. Um, but it's all them. So it's like sex positive songs, songs about anger, songs about being human. And so I'm just like all day long, all day long.
Man, I got one of those. Mine's called Hey Girl. I got the same playlist. Mine's on Apple, but it's so funny because it's got the same people.
Really?
Yes. Jasmine. It's got yeah, Kehlani. It's got I don't have Janae Aiko on there, even though I like her. But I mean, who else is on there? I got Escape songs on there. I mean, everybody's on
Who can I run to?
her. Oh yes.
Yes.
Ari Lennox.
Okay, there's a song called Comfortable by her.
Mm,
Like my heart like wants to jump out of my skin because she talks about being comfortable in intimacy with someone. And I'm like that, like it's the kind that like goes deeper than sex.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And like every time I hear it, I'm like,
mm.
and the chorus is just I feel so comfortable with you. I'm like, yeah.
Oh, okay. So where can people like oh so what are you up to now? What are you up to?
Okay, so nowadays I'm doing so I'm always working through my personal stuff because I'm like, if I'm trying to bring people together, like I have to have a personal like ethic where I work on my own stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so I keep people close and talk to people through that. But in person, I'm working with ministry called Overflow that my friend started years ago. Um, and we are kind of fleshing out what it looks like to have a family brunch sort of situation in
Mm,
person. And what does it look like to do the anti-racist work that a book study like Subversive Seminary does
yeah.
online?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
does it look like to do that in person with people who are open and willing to do that?
Yes.
Um, so that's what I'm working on in person. Um, and then online, um, and the next week here, we are, can I tell the people about what we're doing?
Oh yeah, go for it. Yeah. I didn't know you were gonna do that. It's like, wait, you ain't telling me, girl.
Oh, that's funny. You'll know you'll know why in a second. So next week we are starting a book study with your book.
Hey now. That's right. Let's do it. I'm excited.
I'm really excited about it. I've had I've been dreaming it up for about a month now and
Mm,
finally got some of the like minute details settled. Um and people are on board and I love that it's like two-thirds. I don't love the term BIPOC, but
mhm,
we'll use it for now because it helps us communicate.
mhm,
But
mhm,
two-thirds BIPOC.
mhm,
Um, and so I'm excited to dive in
mhm,
again
mhm,
and just be able. I feel like when we come together with something like that and people bring their wisdom and experience, it's
mhm.
like we have a whole feasting table.
Oh my God,
And
yes.
like it's like culinary delights from all different parts of the world just because everybody's different. It has like uses different seasonings. Not
Mhm.
everybody uses garlic powder, onion powder, seasoned salt, pepper.
Yo, now if you ask Ellison, they know what it means to spice something because they did not at first. That was the first thing.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad they were
They
teachable.
know what's up now. Now they be like,
But yeah, I'm excited. So we're doing that book study. It's going to be 11 weeks, and we're gonna try. We're it's the first one, but we're going to be meshing components of family brunch type holding space for each other and also discussion. So I'm really excited.
I cannot wait. So they can sign up for that where?
Um, so the first actually it's kind of closed
Okay.
for now.
Okay.
Yeah. It was
It's
open
a beta.
just huh?
It's a beta. So hey.
Yeah. It's a beta test.
Yes.
So I was like, when your book came out, I was like, perfect.
Hmm.
Yes, I was like, let's sell this book. I wasn't really conniving like that, but I love the idea that we got to support you. So I was like,
Wow. Well, on that note, any words of wisdom for us?
um, the the first thing that comes to mind is there's a meme, I guess you would call it, with Issa Rae, where she has this couple's baby in her arms and she like drop kicks it and she's like, F them kids. Like my word of wisdom
The episode was hilarious.
would honestly be like F them haters.
Mm,
Like, and I don't mean just like people, but like even like fears, thoughts of anxiety. I have this thing where for me physically connecting my body to my resolve to resist, if I have an anxious thought, I throw up my middle finger at it
mm,
until it dissolves. And like it always does. Like I don't know how to explain it, but when I connect my body to that resolve, is like I no longer take that anxious thought in as
mm.
a part of me. I say, hey, that's an idea that's coming upon me
Yeah.
for whatever reason. Like maybe there's a pressure, maybe there's even a lie about myself, I believe, because I'm like, I bought into that I'm loved and fully lovable. I'm
Mhm,
like, regardless of what it's coming from, like it's not true and I'm not gonna own it.
mhm,
Like I'm not gonna let that dirt in my house.
mhm. Come on, sis.
So I'm like, I just throw up the middle finger and I wait, it goes, and I just go about my business.
Oh my God. I love you so much. Thank you, sis. Love you deeply. And
Thank
thanks for being on the show.
thank you for having me.